Hey everybody, Bob Lazaro here from All Things Leland, and I'm pleased to have back as a guest Mike Kozlosky, the Executive Director of the Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, to talk about transportation regionally, the challenges in terms of being able to finance the many billions of dollars of projects that have been identified that need to be done. Mike, welcome back.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here, Bob.
I appreciate it. Just so we could be really clear again, if you could just explain what the Wilmington MPO is, and then we could get into the other subject matters.
Sure. So we are the federally designated and federally mandated transportation planning agency for the Wilmington urban area. We provide transportation planning services for 494 square miles, serve a population of
Mhm.
about 300,000 people in southeastern North Carolina. As the federally designated and federally mandated regional transportation planning agency, we have a number of federal requirements that we have to meet.
Mhm.
We are, we receive federal funds, and so some of the federal requirements that we have is we're required to develop and adopt a metropolitan transportation plan every 5 years. The
Mhm.
plan is required to be fiscally constrained. It's required to have a minimum 20-year planning horizon, and it focuses on all modes of transportation.
Okay.
We're required to mutually adopt the state and MPO's transportation improvement program. That's the 10-year funding program at the state level. We're required to develop a congestion management process, which we evaluate 33 of our major corridors in our
Okay.
region, also conduct hotspot analysis.
Hmm.
The recommendations from the congestion management process fold into our long range plan. We're required to adopt the federal functional classification network, which is where our federal funds can be spent.
Okay.
And then finally, we receive what's called direct attributable funds that we allocate to our members through a competitive process so that those members can implement projects that are important to them. We also have a number of other
Sure.
responsibilities that our member desire that we provide to
Yeah.
our members, like development review, traffic impact
Sure.
analysis coordination as
You
well.
know, Wilmington is the seventh fastest growing region in the country. And I was ask you just, so what keeps the executive director awake at night?
Well, it's a number of things. I mean, we have a number of needs in this community from a transportation perspective, and then we have a limited amount of funding resources, and so you know we understand that we're growing and we're growing fast, and so we need to be able to address the growth and the congestion, and so what really keeps me up at night is how do we deliver these projects and fund these important projects in our region? And it's not just about today, but it's
Right.
about the next 10, 15, 20, even 50 years down the road. How are we going to move people and goods around this community and across the state efficiently? So that's what keeps me up at night,
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I get it. I was gonna say is that and there is a lack of resources, right? I mean, you have the federal government and you have the state. The state has a limited amount of resources that are designated for the region.
Well, so the in 2013, the legislature approved what's called the Strategic Transportation and Investment Formula. And so prior to 2013, from the late 80s up until 2013, the state used the equity formula. And then in 2013, the legislature approved the STI formula. And the STI formula moved toward a more data driven process for how the state allocates their resources. And so funds are programmed into three different tiers. Uh, Funds are programmed at the statewide mobility tier, at the regional impact tier, and then down at the division needs tier.
Okay. I was gonna ask you, is you have a number of projects identified. What is the delta in terms of available funds as to compared to the cost of the projects?
So as part of our long-range planning process, uh, the long-range plan that we developed, which our current plan is Cape Fear Navigating Change 2050, it's required to be fiscally constrained. And so as part of that process, we prepare a financial analysis. We look at our project needs versus the availability of funding. We also look at alternative funding options that could help fill some of that gap. But in our current plan, we have a $7.9 billion gap between our needs over the next 25 years and what we can actually afford.
Okay. I was going to ask, let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge and its replacement. NC DOT, North Carolina Department of Transportation, just recently released its environmental assessment for that project. What are their next steps, Mike?
So their next steps are to hold two public hearings, one in Brunswick County on September the 14th, and then another in New Hanover County. Excuse me, I got that backwards. Brunswick County is September the 15th. New Hanover County is September 14th. And so the one in New Hanover County will be held at the Cape Fear Community College, and the public hearing on September 15th in Leland will be held at the Cultural Arts Center.
Yeah, in talking about the bridge, and I think it's really important for folks to understand, the Corps Army engineers have made a determination that the navigation channel needs to be able to be open for larger ships. And that drives the clearance of the bridge itself. So whether or not the bridge goes up or the bridge goes high enough has been determined essentially by the Corps Army engineers and I guess the Coast Guard. There are no alternatives for the EA. It's either do nothing, an up and down bridge, or a bridge that goes over.
So as you mentioned, the Corps and the Coast Guard determine the vertical and horizontal clearances requirements for the bridge. And so they have already done that. They've identified a 400-foot horizontal clearance and 135-foot vertical clearance. And so now NCDOT and Federal Highways have to deliver a project that meets those clearance requirements.
Yeah, I mean, so that drives the cost of this substantially. So part of the question then becomes tolling, and as I understand it, if tolls were imposed on this road because of the lack of state funding, it'd be the first time in North Carolina that a toll will be imposed on an existing roadway.
So in order to toll the replacement of the Memorial Bridge, it does require a legislative change. That legislative change has not occurred yet. NCDOT has identified that in order to meet the grant obligation deadline of September of 2027, that they would need that legislative change by February of next year.
Okay. And when would the MPO have to say yay or nay to tolling itself? The same deadline?
So the MPO board has already taken action and a position related to tolling. So back in May of 2025, the board approved a resolution supporting the continuation of exploring all potential funding options for the replacement of the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. And during that action, they also identified that they would amend their current long-range plan, and that was Cape Fear Moving Forward 2045, as well as they would adopt at that time it was the draft 2026 to 2035 state and MPO transportation improvement program with the project identified as a toll facility. The board did in July approve the 2026 to 2035 state and MPO transportation improvement programs with the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge toll option included in the STIP. And then in October, with the adoption of Cape Fear Navigating Change 2050, which is our long range plan, the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge replacement is identified as a toll facility in that plan. So no further action from our board is required to
Okay.
implement the project as a toll facility. However, if the board wanted to look at alternative funding, say through a public-private partnership, that would require action from the board. And then the
Okay.
board also does have until February of 2027 to withdraw their support
Okay.
for the toll option for the replacement.
I know that town of Leland has been opposed to tolling, and some of the other localities have voted similarly, somewhat split votes by some members of the from the same jurisdiction. So all of this is coming to a head by February at the latest.
In order to meet NCDOT's grant obligation deadline of September 2027 to obligate the funds for the replacement of the bridge. That's the schedule that we've been
Okay.
provided by the department.
I was one last thing I was reading, and I wanted to hear from you directly. I saw that there was some state legislation passed that was directed towards, I guess, the Charlotte Raleigh area that would, if a project was removed, that the localities would have to reimburse NCDOT for that funding. Do you read that the same for the bridge replacement? If you're against tolling, that's removing the project.
So the Senate Bill 257, which is the bill in which the clawback language was included, and it's the state budget. It does identify that, once DOT begins pre-development activities, if a NPO or RPO were to remove their approval or stop a project from going forward, then the NPO or RPO, the members of the board that voted to remove the project,
Right,
proportionate to their weighted voting. And it's important to point out that in the Wilmington MPO, we don't have weighted voting.
right,
Charlotte CRTPO, they have weighted voting. We
right.
do. But the members that voted to remove would be financially responsible. We've sought clarification from NCDOT related to the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. We have yet to receive
Okay,
that clarification. But our board has been given a deadline of February of 2027
okay,
to withdraw any support. And so we would argue that that does not apply because we've been given the ability to withdraw by that time frame.
okay.
It's also important to point out that the clawback language is included in the budget, and I think DOT still needs to provide some guidance
Sure.
on one, what is unilateral,
Right.
because I think that there's projects that would not be a unilateral decision by the MPO, and Independence Boulevard Extension in Wilmington is one of
Okay.
those. We received a request from the city to remove Independence Boulevard Extension from the adopted state and MPO Transportation Improvement Program. Just last year, DOT released the draft EIS for that project. They had public hearings in January. Based on the public hearings, based on the cost of the project, both the MPO and DOT were in agreement that we needed to remove that project. So we did. And so we did ask it for clarification if there would be a payback on that one. There was not. And so we've sought additional clarification on the bridge. But DOT is really going to have to come up with some guidance on what is a point of no return, and at what point does the MPO or RPO become responsible? The members of the MPO or RPO become financially responsible, because it's not the MPO itself, it's the members, the cities and the counties that
Yeah.
vote to remove.
At the end of the day, when you look at this project list and the delta in cost, the lack of state funding, there really needs in my opinion, to be a serious discussion about how the region itself needs to address this issue, whether it's creating a transportation authority or using existing co provisions of the Code of North Carolina, waiting on the state to come up with the money to help support the seventh fastest growing region in the country in an important part of the economy of the state of North Carolina. Um, it's either going to have to be sooner or later, either that or you're going to have, gridlock.
Sure. And so, as you mentioned, uh, the, so the state, the amount of resources that are allocated to transportation are not what needs to be allocated toward transportation. So the state's either going to need to look at generating additional revenue and allocating those funds to transportation, or they're going to have to allow the locals to make some of those decisions
Yes.
for themselves. And they've started to do that. If you look at the PAVE Act in Mecklenburg County, they have allowed Mecklenburg County to implement a 1 cent sales tax for transportation. And so, we're looking at a number of potential funding options that were identified in Cape Fear Navigating Change 2050. We did create an alternative funding subcommittee that reviewed those options. That they found that the only one that really moves the needle would be a local option sales tax. So we're continuing to have some of those discussions and trying to figure out how we generate additional revenue for the region.
If really from an economic standpoint, just a transportation standpoint, addressing it regionally, just my personal opinion, having seen what happened in Northern Virginia and the lack of state investment, the localities finally said, we got to do something on our own. And they have, and they have made considerable investments and across different transportation modes too. It's not all cars, it's public transportation, buses, so on and so forth. So, Mike, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I know you guys are going to be busy. Public hearing is going to be at the Leland Cultural Arts Center on the 15th of September. I had shared that information out. All the documents are on the NC dot website, including the appendices, etc., so people can read it and get an understanding of what the state is looking at. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're
Have a
welcome.
great day.
You too.